Hey, you're listening to 88.7 FM WLUW, Chicago Sound the Lines, broadcasting from the campus of Loyola University at 77 degrees outside on this beautiful Sunday morning. Thank you to Vicky Toback. Give her a follow and also go pick up Contact High. Trust me, it's about 20 pounds, but it's a book that is worth having. I wish I would have brought it in so that our next guest could check it out. I'm talking about Defcee. He's been working, putting out music, doing things. Let's get a little bit of sample of who he is, and then we'll be back right here on 88.7 FM WLUW. 8:02 here on 88.7 FM. I'm Weekend Gabe, hold down your Sunday morning, and that was from our next studio guest, Defcee, who has the Summer Courses EP out there. Just dropped last week?
Yes, sir. Dropped Tuesday, June 25th.
There you go.
Everywhere you can stream music, go get the Summer Courses EP from myself, and now's the time.
I know you have to definitely start putting some more of your music on the streaming services. It's a little light.
Yeah. So I mean, the back catalog is vast. But the back catalog is also accessible at defcee.bandcamp.com. And there are just kind of, for me, I'm somebody where I think there are too many people who, when it's up on streaming platforms, I think royalties kind of come into the equation, and I want to make sure I'm not jerking anybody. So that's the major reason why there have been a lot of moving parts involved in putting that music out. And I want to make sure that people are fairly compensated for their work. And so if I don't have the means or the resources to compensate them, I would rather that music kind of live on the Bandcamp page, and then where there's a little less traffic, as opposed to it being as accessible as it would be on streaming platforms. So that's the reason why it stays the back catalog. But from here on out, I think definitely every project is going to go up on streaming.
Is that just because, like, earlier you're like, oh, we're like, do it for the love, like we're just building and collaborating and let's put it out there and whatever it does. And then when you start like adding, like, well, there's streams and there's money behind those numbers, right? Like, how does that penny break down?
Well, and for me also, it's like, the penny for sure. How does that particular
percentage of a penny?
0.00745% of a cent. But it's more so just, when the music's more accessible, then that means that if somebody wants to pick something up for licensing or something along those lines, I just want to make sure that the paperwork is done off the bat. And so, I want to make sure that everyone, again, is fairly compensated for their work. And if I'm not in a position to do that for people, then at the very least, I paid them the one time. If people want to support my music, they can on the Bandcamp page, which doesn't have a streaming payout, and also just that money goes directly back into the music. But if it's that accessible, or there's potential for a song to be streamed a whole bunch of times to where it could possibly be lucrative relatively, for streaming, then I would want to make sure people's bread got broken off the right way. And then also just people have given me verses that they may feel sound dated now, or beats that may sound dated to them now, and so they don't necessarily want that music to be as accessible as well. So I definitely understand that too. But a producer that I worked with pretty frequently, I don't want to put his name out there until it's official, but we'll probably throw a compilation of our material together up on streaming once we figure out things like, cover art and all that. So that'll probably be up within the next month or so, along with a whole bunch of new music.
Last time you were here, you were saying that you were looking for people to do cover art.
Are
you still looking for people?
I think something that I need to do a better job of myself as an independent artist, and I think this is the advice I'd give any other independent artist, is to just kind of have a reliable team of people that you can go to in moments like that. I know that if I tried to take a stab at it, it'd probably be passable, but it wouldn't be to the standard of
the quality.
And I think that's the one thing that I've been really fortunate to have, is people who are willing to collaborate with me as far as the graphic design of things. I've never really had to, with the exception of maybe one or two times, sacrifice the quality of the cover art for the cost. And I think people in the era where I'm just trying to throw up as much music as possible, I think people really undervalue what cover art can do for your music, because that's the first impression somebody's getting of you without ever having heard a bar. And so if they see that you've put the time and the effort or the finances toward getting cover art that looks professional,
sure,
they might be more willing to give you a listen than they would somebody where it's just, a selfie.
I agree 1,000%. We get music all the time through the shows that I work with here on WLUW, and also people just send me music to like listen to, and then you open your SoundCloud and you see the little JPEG photo, and it's like, wow, okay. So like you didn't put a lot of time in the presentation. So what is how does that translate to the music?
Yeah.
And I might give it 30 seconds, and then like, okay, well, yeah, this kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
And also the email too that people send.
Ooh.
It's like just a tip for those who are watching and listening to this later on. Please write a professional email or somewhat professional.
Yeah.
Starting it off with "Yo, dog," like like I'm a fan.
Yeah. And
then not have information, like correct information about who you're sending it to, but then also just typos, grammar errors, and just it's bad.
Well, I was lucky enough to when I went to college, I was at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and when I was in Madison, DJ who used to play all of the open mics when we were up there was DJ Payne One, who's now gone on to produce for Jeezy, 50 Cent, a lot of really major MCs, Pusha T, and Royce the 5'9", actually he's done a lot of work with Royce. And one of the things that Payne taught us from the jump was if you go to blogs, so this is kind of dating it, but if you go to the blogs and you go to the blog roles, what you can do is just make an Excel spreadsheet of all of those emails under the contact tab. And when you send those emails, make sure that you're taking 5 minutes per email to make sure it's professional, and just to let the person who's running the website know that you've actually done your due diligence.
Right. It helps.
Looking up the website or looking into the radio station if I'm trying to get my music played here, you know what I mean? And I know that Morning Rush has a selection of music that I really enjoy. I know that if I'm the person DJing the mix, I would like to know that the person who's trying to solicit me to get me to play their music has listened to what I'm doing, and there's a mutual appreciation there.
Right. Before
I even try to get into the song.
I think too often, not to go into a tangent, but I think too often some of the younger artists are just eager to just send a mass email out of like 1,000 blogs.
Yeah, it's so bad.
Okay, one swipe, I'm done, and then whatever sticks. If someone picks it up, great. But again, it's sort of that quality aspect. Like, do you just want a blog or some guy who's just creating a blog who's starting to post your stuff? Yeah. Or do you want a Fake Shore or a Two Dope Boys or a DJ Booth to get it, which is going to give you way more traction and more eyes and ears? So I think it's not that understanding of how you're putting it out there, but to whom you're putting it out to. Yeah. And I think that sometimes those are things that young artists aren't thinking about when they're done with the music, because they think like, well, I did the hard part, but actually the promotion and the marketing is equally as difficult, if not even more, than creating the song. Yeah. So those are a little bit lessons that, I think, as far as, I don't want to call myself a gatekeeper, but as someone that people sometimes ask, like, what can I do? And those are the things that I often mention.
Well, no, and I think in a way, if you play a radio show that has prominent MCs coming up to do interviews, or you're playing great music and you're known, I think you are a gatekeeper of sorts, but you're a gatekeeper who's willing to open those gates for up-and-coming artists. Yeah. And so if you're an up-and-coming artist, you just have to be professional. And I think a lot of times that lack of professionalism comes from never having to be professional in any other context. So you and I both have worked in public institutions of education, and so we've received those emails that have 40 to 50 names in the subject line, and you're just like, oh man, like this again. Somebody hit, and then one person should have just hit reply, and instead they hit reply all, and suddenly you're a part of an email chain, and you're getting 27 notifications on your phone and so it's the same kind of professionalism that you should have in any setting, including as an independent musician. So I think that's a gem for, the 14-year-old that might be up right now listening to this early on a Sunday. You know what I
mean? We're talking with Defcee here on 88.7 FM, WLUW's The Morning Rush on Weekend Gabe. Don't forget to follow us on the socials at Weekend Gabe, at Morning Rush Shot, at WLUW. All right, talking about 14-year-old teenagers. A young Defcee, 11 years old, back in early 2000s. you find your way into the hip hop world, which I think is probably a little bit older than when I started listening to hip hop. I think I was more like 8 or 9.
Right.
And I'm dating myself by like, it was like LL Cool J's Bad.
Yeah.
I was living in California. My father was stationed in Orange County. He was in the Marines.
Okay.
And so right around the 80s, the Def Jam run, that's when I was like, when I was starting to hear what hip hop sounded like, the Fat Boys and LL Cool J. Those were some of the 2 big names I remember.
Yeah.
So what was young Defcee? How do you step into this world of hip hop?
So my origin story with hip hop actually starts when I was 2. So my mom was tutoring these 2 young women who are now my god sisters, Bree and Tiffany.
Nice.
Neither one of them are listening right now because they both have full-time jobs and they're asleep. But just in case hey Bree and Tiffany, shout out to you. And so they
well, lucky for them, will be podcasting.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Take that part out so that it seems less like. Anyway, so they dragged my dad to a Crisscross concert when I was 2 years old, and they brought home the cassette single of Jump, and so they played Jump. And I immediately started. That's one of my earliest memories. Is I remember jumping up and like running around the room, and I remember I was rubbing my fingertips against the arm of an armchair in my parents' condo because it sounded kind of like scratching.
Oh.
So I remember gravitating to the sound of scratching and just hip hop in general at 2. And then even when I wasn't writing raps, I would do things like beatbox to myself and try to freestyle on my way to school when I was in grade school, which I'm sure the parents driving past me thought, there's a mentally stable fourth grader. And so it was just kind of a love affair from a very young age. And then when I was 11, it was on a whim. I was on a ride back from a White Sox game with a couple of friends of mine, and I think it was Let's Get It by P. Diddy and Black Rob and G-Dep. Yeah. Shout out to G-Dep, who's one of the most underrated rappers, in my opinion, of that era. He was nice. And so I just picked up, there was a notepad in a little pouch behind my mom's the driver's seat, and I just pulled it out and I started writing. And my first 2 bars are terrible. It was, this my mic, I'll steal your girl like I steal your bike. I was stealing neither hearts nor bicycles at that age. But I think that was kind of where I just kind of got addicted to writing. I was like, okay, I can do this myself. And now that I can do this myself, what else can I do with it? And then I just kind of took it from there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think it was the same thing. I think everyone who listens to hip hop eventually starts to write their own stuff, or kind of based off what they're listening. So it's pretty normal.
Yeah.
And then it's always awful. It's never good.
Yeah, it's really, I've never heard somebody who said, yeah, my first 2 bars were amazing.
No, absolutely not. It's always awful.
Yeah.
I talked with this young kid earlier this year, and he's 17, and I tell the story because it's just like, it seems very common now, where he's been writing and writing songs, producing and making records or songs, and he's only 17, and he's like, how much longer does it take?
Yeah.
It's like, keep working at it.
Yeah. And I think that's the thing that, and maybe it's social media culture, but and just shortened attention spans and instant gratification being what it is in 2019. But I think it was for me, it was never the sense of when am I going to get good. It was just I kept writing and I kept writing and I kept writing because I love to do it. And then the progression was natural, because you're also, the hip hop that you're into is radio hip hop initially, right? And so you're hearing the hits on the radio. So I was listening to Back That Thing Up by Juvenile on the radio when I was
and we still are.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great song, but you're not necessarily thinking to yourself, I really like Juvenile's flow on this beat or these cadences. It's the hook that's catching you, and it's the instrumental that's catching you. Same with like the Rock Wilder by Method Man and Redman, which is the other radio song that I was super into.
Yeah. Where
looking back, the rapping on there is incredible. But at the time, that's not what I'm thinking. I'm thinking I like the beat and I like the flows. So, and I didn't even know it was a flows. I just knew I liked what it sounded like. So, it really just is kind of like persistence and consistency. If you work hard, if you're working like writing 1 rap a day, and then the quality of the rap that you're listening to gets better and better, or you're listening to rap music and starting to be able to identify what it is you like about it or what makes it great rap music, I think at that point, then you know what you're aiming for and where the standard is. And as long as you're just consistent and you're constantly consumed with getting better, you'll be better before you know it.
Do you kind of feel like you work with young kids? You worked in the high school doing spoken word through the Chicago Young Authors and the workshops. We'll get into that more. But do you see that level of effort by today's younger artists and those who are just moving into this work? Do you kind of see that same dedication and focus that you were committing to it? Or, like you said, kind of like this instant gratification, like, oh, like, this doesn't seem too hard, making rap songs. Like, everyone's, like anyone could do it, and then, you know, they just often run, even if it's bad or good, they just often run with it, because they're just happy to have something to present.
Right.
Like, well, what is your reflection on that?
I think that's what's kind of time immemorial. What happens for time immemorial is that you have people who make rap music just because they want to say they make rap music, and then you have people that make rap music because they really love to make it and they want to make sure it's as good as it can possibly be.
I think it's 75-25. Like, people who just want to say that they want to rap, or that they're rappers.
And for me, it's all about, how do I pull somebody from the 75 over to the 25? And so part of that is, if I can tell you what you're doing right, and you see that, you get that validation, and then you keep coming back to me for advice, and then at a certain point you get comfortable enough with the idea of me giving you feedback that you start to take it and apply it.
Right.
Then at that point, I feel like I've done something right, and I feel like you're actively working to get better. And I think there are a lot of people who just start off, like, I didn't start off writing raps because I was super in love with the craft of it. I just wanted to try it out and see what it was like. And then eventually I fell in love with the craft and trying to constantly get better and improve myself. And I think there are more kids out there like that than we would think. And I think the thing that it's really difficult to remember when you get to a certain point age-wise is that, you know, we all fall in love with the surface level of something first. Right. And then we get more in depth in terms of the reasons why that we love that thing. And hip hop that's not an exclusive thing to hip hop. You know, it's in rock music. It's in sports, right? You know, like I might see Michael Jordan dunking from the free throw line and think it's the greatest thing ever. But not necessarily be in love with the game of basketball. I just know that looked really cool. And then you come around to loving the game after you start watching more and more of it, because you have more reasons to love it. Yeah.
We're talking with Defcee here on 88.7 FM, WLUW's The Morning Rush with WeekendGabe. We're here on WLUW.org if you want to stream us, because sometimes our signal is a little blotchy in different parts of the city. So you can find us on the internets. When I think it was 08 is your first album.
07.
07?
Yeah.
So you're late teenager.
Yeah, 17.
You actually called it an album, so it wasn't like a mixtape. You're like, I got the album. My album is out.
Yeah. I mean, part of that too was back when the distinction between a mixtape and an album was clear.
That was heavy mixtape era too.
Yeah. Like, I'm not rapping over a 50 Cent beat. I'm rapping over this beat I got from my mans. You know. So, and I think that once the lines and there were, like, quote unquote, they used to call them street albums. You know, what we call mixtapes now that have all original production, they used to get called street albums because that was what a lot of artists used to just go in the studio and make so much material, and then they had to fulfill a certain obligation with that label, so they would put out a street album. And it wasn't necessarily a body of work like a blueprint or something like that.
Right.
But it was something that they could say, I put out an album for you, and they didn't necessarily have to put a whole lot of time or effort into promoting it or putting it together in order to fulfill that obligation to their contract. So, yeah, I mean, that I knew it was an album because I knew I didn't jack anybody's beat. I knew that I got all of the beats from the producers, and I called it an album, and I recorded it during finals week, most of it during finals week, and then at certain other places that I could get free studio time at, and YCA footed the bill for half of the cost of duplication, and my parents footed the other half, and I paid my parents back their investment from selling it just like within 2 weeks.
So you were actually doing like hand-to-hand mixtape sales?
Yeah, for like $5. And then I put it out around the time that I graduated from high school, so I was at the senior barbecue, like trying to sell them to people for $5. My brothers, Aaron and Gabe, my younger brothers, I'm the oldest of three. They were passing it out at the middle school and like bringing me back the money. I mean, it also just like, I never really imagined that my brothers would be super into what I did, because at the time, that age, you know, my youngest brother is 5 years younger than me. My other brother is 2 years younger than me. I never imagined that they would be interested in the kind of music I made, because they were into what was on the radio. But
right.
Me being the older brother who rapped, it made them want to go do that for me, which is really cool. And so, like I said, I was able to my parents invested $250 in it, and I was able to make that investment back for them within 2 weeks of putting the album out, which, you know, for somebody who was just really hitting open mics,
yeah,
and who couldn't get into Sub T, that was really beautiful. And I think the affirmation that I needed to know that rap was something worth pursuing for me.
Did it help that they were supporting your effort, your dream, or not dream, but your passion to make music, where we often hear a lot of people like, you need to do a real job, or you need to focus on something tangible that will help you in life, and that sometimes music, especially hip-hop, is always kind of discarded as that thing that everyone does, so it doesn't make it special. Mm-hmm. Did that help fuel you or give you some added incentive to be, you know, more aggressive with getting the music out?
Well, I think my dad was a journalist for a long time, and then wound up getting into business and getting away from journalism. And the one thing that he always told me that I really took to heart was he wanted to make sure that when he saw I was passionate about making art and writing, that I could pursue that without ever having to worry about having to get a job or do something else, because he values art. Yeah. And so he wanted me to do that. And then, even though they didn't really understand the rap thing at first until they saw me perform with my guy, Wizard Jenkins the Great, shout out to him. He beatboxed for me and I rapped. I was 16. This is part of a summer camp through YCA. Yeah. And they walked in and they saw it and they understood it. After years of them not really getting rap in general, let alone why I would rap, but they saw something in that moment that was worthwhile and valuable. So they just always encouraged me to do it. I think there are some times where they don't understand it just because there's that generation gap. Yeah. Where they just, it's the words move too fast for them to catch everything. So all they hear are the curse words if I'm cursing. But they always encouraged me to do it, and they always wanted me to be creative, and especially considering the fact that I had self-esteem issues in school, they wanted me to have an outlet to like get those feelings out. And so, yeah, they've always been encouraging. I've been really lucky in that regard.
You went to high school in River Forest, right?
Oak Park, River Forest. Yeah, I grew up in River Forest, but went to high school in Oak Park.
So, which, if from recently being there, it's predominantly white.
River Forest, actually both suburbs. I don't know why I'm from both suburbs are actually, predominantly white. The school itself is probably relatively diverse for a suburban school, but it's still predominantly white.
Was there any pushback from any of the kids of color who were like, this white guy, he's rapping?
Because you know why? Because I was good. And so I think that the white rapper struggle story is bogus. Like if you ask,
if you're dope, you're dope.
Yeah, if you're nice, you're nice. You know, and I think that that's something where the people who gave me the toughest time for being a white rapper were other white people, because they just didn't understand it.
They thought you were like trying to conform to some culture that isn't your own.
Right. So it was like you're either you're trying to be black or you're trying to be Eminem. It was one of the two. And then it also didn't help that I was trash. But I never got any flack from any person of color for trying to rap. Yeah. You know, it was always white people who gave me the hardest time. And also, I just think a lot of white rappers, it's like you feel like you need a narrative or you need a struggle to match the struggle that you hear in music that's made by black and brown MCs. So you create this narrative, or just in your head, you imagine that it's so much tougher for you in hip hop because you're white, when that isn't really the case. Right. And it was never the case for me. Nobody ever really gave me flack. If anything, I got encouragement and validation. Yeah. And so, and part of that too was because I never tried to be anything I wasn't.
Yeah. So I got that a lot too when I was in high school, because it wasn't nothing but hip hop, and it was this assumption because I'm this Latin kid that I like Spanish music, and I don't even speak Spanish, so it's like I just grew up on American music because that was what was in the household I was raised around, and then hip hop and soul music started to collide. So the two records, like I understood the original, understood the sample, and so it was just a great transition for me. And so being in that space with more black students, more Latin students who are listening to hip hop, and then there'd be people who were like, why are you trying to be black, or why are you like I'd wear like Fat Farm and whatever the clothing of the day was, why are you trying to be black? And I just never understood the whole concept of trying to be. It's like you are who you are, but from the outside looking in, for people who look like you who don't understand it, then it's like the criticism of like, why aren't you more like us? And that just always kind of just like mind effed me a lot, but as a teenager.
Yeah, and then now it's just working in schools, and I see the huge amount of cultural appropriation that white students engage in without even realizing it's cultural appropriation.
Right.
And I see a lot of white students where it's trying on things that are used to demean these other groups and trying to own it for yourself and make yourself look cooler. And that's not okay, because you're not genuinely interacting with anyone and trying to get to know them, you're just trying to try something out and give yourself some sort of cachet.
Yeah.
And so that's something that's, maybe it's not as new of a phenomenon as I think it is, but I remember that, you couldn't really get away with that when I was in high school.
Yeah.
So it's just really weird to kind of see that shift and see how that's changed now.
Yeah, obviously hip hop now is like explored. Like we've seen so much success from white rappers. Mac Miller obviously is one of the more predominant names in hip hop the last 10 years. So it's not even like a real thing anymore. It's just now it just feels like it's about dope or not being dope.
Yeah, and it's also about, do you have a sincere appreciation for the culture, or
That's
are you
true
just
too.
trying to come up off it? And I think Mac initially. And not to disrespect him at all, but I think the public perception of him when he entered into music based on the music he was making was he's trying to come up off of hip hop.
Right.
And I think Asher Roth ran into the same thing. And then what you saw was, as their careers progressed, I started to have an understanding that these were guys who genuinely loved the music and were trying to contribute something to it.
Yeah.
As opposed to a Post Malone, who again I don't know personally, but just based on the way that he's presented himself to the public and based on the things he said publicly, it's just not really clear to me that he loves hip hop. It's just something he tried to do because he wanted to do it, and then he got into the things that he actually loved to do.
Yeah.
Because trying on hip hop gave him enough money and resources to go do the things that he actually wanted to do.
Yeah, I just had this conversation with my wife and my son, who listens to Post Malone a lot, and they're like, "Oh, well, he's hip hop." I'm like, "Wait, hang on, no, whoa, let's not go there." But like those guys aren't like a Slim Jesus or these like internet rappers who catch fire for, like you said, appropriating black culture and like for all the wrong reasons, and then that kind of like that sways opinion about artists who are dope who happen to be white.
Yeah, but again, it's something like if I do get flack for being a white rapper, the way white privilege works is, as soon as I step out of rap, I'm straight. It's not. I'm not going to have to face any real struggles in my personal life pertaining to my race. Outside of hip hop. So if I leave the show or I leave the cypher, suddenly that weight has been lifted, and now I get away with pretty much anything as a heterosexual white dude. And so that's the thing that I think a lot of white rappers forget, is even if you do get fronted on for being a white rapper, the minute you step out of that space, no one's going to look at you sideways for pretty much anything that you do.
Sure.
And so, it shouldn't be about your quote-unquote white rapper struggle, which doesn't exist anyway.
Exactly. We're talking with Defcee here on WLUW's The Morning Rush, 88.7 FM. It's 8:31. It's a beautiful day in Chicago, so hopefully you got your day planned out. Gonna go visit the parents later on this afternoon. They can see the baby, for the second time in 6 weeks.
Congratulations again.
Appreciate that, man. You're bringing babies. Speaking of parents, So you mentioned that you were like, your parents didn't understand a lot of what the subject matter. It was just moving too fast for them. So I was reading that you were trying not to curse in a lot of your early work. Was that intentional because of them?
Yeah, so early on, my mom, and the argument that she made actually made a lot of sense. So she said early on, she said, it's not the issue I have is that you're cursing. It's that there are so many other words that you could use that you could be more creative with.
So she was helping you break down your bars? Like, you can
no, she wasn't helping me break down my bars. I think I would need to break down my bars for my mom, which I love my mom, but I'm not trying to explain this bar about why this other rapper sucks.
Like you could use an adjective right there.
Yeah. But it was more so just, and I remember, hearing about Rakim didn't curse when he rapped, and at the time thinking about how Rakim was, at that point, and still is one of the greatest ever, and is the god, not only the god MC, but the god particle for how people rap well now.
Right.
And so, in thinking about that, I tried to take that approach early, and then I got a little bit older, and I knew I didn't want to use sexist language, and I knew I didn't want to use like B words and H words, and I knew I didn't want to use homophobic language, but I still was like dropping F-bombs all the time just to kind of fill up space, And then like last year at some point, I just kind of realized that, I'm going to have music with some cursing in it, because there's stuff where before I stopped cursing in my raps, there are songs that I still really enjoy. Yeah. And I think cursing is used effectively in that music.
Sometimes it's necessary.
Yeah, and I just have found that in the music I'm writing, it's not really, Yeah. And so if I want to make music that I really enjoy, yeah, it has to be made with intention. And so if I'm using language unintentionally just to fill up space, that feels lazy to me as a writer. I have higher standards for myself than that. So that's one reason why. And then the pragmatic reason that we were talking about a little bit before we went on air is because I don't want to have to hit my engineer and say, can you reverse these words throughout this EP, or can you do, and I know I could probably make the radio edits in Audacity myself, but I'm also somebody where it's like, I don't want to have to put the song file in, reverse the word, and that reverses the beat for a second, and it's disorienting to people as a listener. So, yeah. Yeah,
I agree 1,000% that like it also just makes it just intolerable. If I had a nickel for every N word that I reversed in my life, I'd be a rich man at this point. And so it's almost like I understand the use of explicit words, but also it's like it's so carelessly used, especially with younger artists and even older artists. Because Jay-Z is like, even recently, he's gone like more extreme and sort of has let himself slide off where it's not as creative. But then also I kind of like remember like what Howard Stern was saying when he went over to Sirius XM. He's like, oh, well, like I have this free platform and I could swear, but then he's like, it's just not as fun. It's like, it was fun trying to like escape around the rules. But with hip hop, it seems like because there are no rules, that people feel like they can just go in and just say whatever they want. And if it sounds great, the beat's hot, the hook's great, then it's going to work. Right. But if you don't have all those additional components and you're just dropping explicit words, then it's like it's just garbage. So.
And there are some times where it's like, I get the Eminem bar where it's like, Will Smith said he doesn't curse and F him and F him too. Like, I understand that attitude because there's still a little bit of that attitude in me. But there's also the craftsman in terms of my writing. Again, a lot of it comes back to intention.
Absolutely.
And I rap with people who curse a whole lot, and I don't judge them for that, and I get why it's necessary for their music, but it's just not really necessary for the newer material that I'm writing. Yeah. And I may feel differently. There may be a day where I'm super angry and that's the only thing I can express in a verse, and I'm not going to censor that. you know.
Yeah. One of the things I was really excited about was that you're a huge Little Brother, Ninth Wonder, Crisis fan.
Yeah.
Which is back in 05, 06 when the listening came out. I've always been a day one fan from the moment I ran into them.
Mm-hmm.
But then that kind of like led you to find Sean Price and sort of his reemergence in the second part of his career.
Yeah, man.
Which I find the best part about this, and you could probably speak on this, was that you found him after like sort of his Duck Down days and as Helter Skelter, but as a solo artist.
Yeah.
But then you actually had the interest to go back and listen to those 90s records. And that's something that I don't see a lot with younger artists, where it kind of like everything starts at Kanye in 02, 01, and then like anything that happened before that is like, that's on Shade 45 or on Backspin on Sirius.
But part of it is also it's all relative, right?
Yeah.
So I like to do math with when albums come out. So in 2003, when I was
12, 13.
Let me do the math. 15. 14, 15 years old, right? I was 14 going on 15 in 2003. The music that came out in 88, right, was as far removed from me then as College Dropout is for kids who are 14,
right,
15 now.
Right.
So for me, I don't really hold it against kids that didn't do that knowledge. The other thing was, I remember we got, I hope the FCC isn't listening for anything other than cursing right now.
Yeah, that dumb button right there.
All right, yeah. No, this is for a different reason.
Got it.
So we had the DSL hookup in the crib for the first time. We switched from dial-up to DSL, and the very first thing I did was I bought a spindle of blank CDs.
Yep.
And I downloaded SoulSeek, which is a file sharing application that people didn't really rock with as hard as they rock with
like
LimeWire and Kazaa. And so I went, and then I had my copy of The Source, which you and I also spoke about off air.
Yep.
I had my copy of The Source. It was their 150th issue, and it was all of their classic albums. And I went and I burned copies of almost all of those albums. Because my parents wouldn't let me get the explicit versions of things at that point.
Yeah.
So I had to do it on the low.
Yeah.
Because then they wouldn't flip out because they wouldn't see like the physical with CD. The parental advisory.
Yeah.
And so I just studied that. And so I was studying Smith & Wesson without knowing Sean Price used to be Ruck from Helter Skelter. So I was listening to The Shining and listening to Sean Price rap before I really knew that was Sean Price.
Right.
And then when I heard Little Brother, I fell in love with the Minstrel Show and the Chitlin Circuit 1.5 and the way Fonte rapped to me was just so dope. And then I just got super into their music, and I used to go on my hip hop websites. Allhiphop.com was my preferred.
Oh yeah, absolutely. My
preferred method of getting new music, and they used to have that section where they post the new singles.
Yeah.
So I saw it produced by Crisis next to Sean Price, Onion Head. And I hit play on that, and the sample was what caught me first, because it sounded like some dude just like shaking his face while he was talking into the microphone.
Yeah.
I never heard anything like that before. My neck just started snapping right off the bat. And I heard Sean Price say, "I'll smack off half your smile, go to court in the suit, and smack the other half after trial." And like he just had bars like that throughout the whole thing. And I just started flipping because I never heard anybody where it was so technically perfect, but then there was so much tongue-in-cheek humor in there as well.
Absolutely.
And he's still to this day my favorite rapper. Rest in peace to Sean Price, because I think Sean Price let me know that it was cool to be just a regular person.
Yeah.
And also just a beast on the microphone.
Yeah.
And it's almost like insulting to call him a regular person because of how good he was at rapping and how good the music is that he left behind.
Yeah.
But the way that he portrayed himself in the media really was like, I'm just a dad and I just so happen to rap better than everybody else.
Right.
And so that kind of laid the blueprint and remained an inspiration for me even through to now.
Your style is, we were mentioning last time you were here, you were using a lot of similes. Like you said, it was like a Valley Girl. When
I was a kid. There was a dude named Brendan Hurd. Shout out to him, who was a member of the spoken word club that I was in high school. And Brendan came back. He heard me rap for the first time when I was a freshman, and it was trash, but he saw something in me. He told me to keep going. And then I didn't see him again for a year. He came back when I was a sophomore, and by that point I started, writing raps and recording them, and he heard me rap. I rapped everything out of my notebook for him, walking away from the club ended, so we walked up the street. I walked with him, and he heard me, and he's like, "You use the word like a lot, and that's cool, but you starting to sound like a Valley girl a little bit." And I was like, dang. All right. And then it kind of sent me back to the drawing board. Anyway, so yeah, I was a big punchline guy, and I think the easiest way at that point for me to get punchlines or for me to make a cipher blow up, because that was my whole goal in life, was I want to make sure that everybody who hears me rap in a cipher is going to hear a bar that makes them go, "Oh," turn around, walk away, and then come back when people are ready to rap again.
Yeah.
And that was the easiest way for me to get a reaction.
Yeah.
And then what I found as I was getting older, I was listening to MC's Sketch 185 from Tomorrow Kings is definitely a person like that. Quell and Typical Cats, Vakil for sure, Chino XL.
Yep.
So these are people where they have punchlines that weren't necessarily applicable to whack rappers, so they were using them in different contexts. Like Sketch has a bar where he says the difference between the truth and a lie is a lie has to make sense, and nobody cares where the money comes from as long as it pays rent. And I remember hearing those two bars, and it's just so profound.
Yeah.
And I realized that there isn't one way to write a punchline, or there isn't one way to write something that's going to catch somebody like that.
Yeah.
And so for me, the goal then shifted to, how can I make it so that every bar I write can be as profound, or at least remain compelling across an entire verse. So my understanding of what a punchline was changed considerably at that point. Because initially, you're right, it really was just a whole bunch of similes.
Yeah.
Do
you feel like you explore a lot of feelings, a lot of emotion, you tell a lot more stories?
Yeah.
And it feels like you're almost documenting your life as you're progressing through your career, and it doesn't feel like so much forced, like you're a battle rapper or you're confronting anyone. You're just kind of like unfolding everything that's happening. That transition, was that a natural transition for you as an artist, or like you mentioned, like it kind of took someone to tell you to, like, yo, that's great, but if you're gonna be a great songwriter?
I mean, I remember I heard shout out to Uncle Butter, who actually teaches at the high school where I student taught. So Butter had this song that he performed at the open mics I go to called "The Eye in Hip Hop." And the point of the whole song was, why are we out here talking about how great we are? There's so much other subject matter we could tackle. And the first time I heard it, it was 2006. I was too young to really be into it. I just kind of took it personal. I was like, man, yeah, he's saying this. It's making me feel a way, but I got to pretend it's not. Because if you listen to my first album that I put out when I was 17, half of it is just like battle rap, battle rap, battle rap. But then as I got older and I started going through stuff, I realized that, okay, my only way for decompressing, because when I was in high school, I wrote a bunch of battle raps because I was an angry kid, but I didn't know how to talk about the emotional stuff I was feeling. I just knew I needed to vent about something. And so that was the way that I vented. You get older, your problems change. You need to vent in different ways.
Yeah.
And so that's when that kind of took on a new utility for me. And then, because the music I was listening to in high school when I was doing the battle rapping was like Cage, Hell's Winter album, or like Little Brother, The Minstrel Show. And those are albums that are substantive. It's not just a whole bunch of battle rapping.
Right.
But that's all I was doing. I was just trying to do a whole bunch of battle rapping. And what I realized now with the benefit of hindsight was I was just an angry kid looking to vent. And then as I got older, I realized that I could probably approach it, that I could use my music to reflect on the things I was going through as I was going through them. So somebody like Scarface suddenly became a blueprint for me, because he was somebody who was very open about the way that he felt about pretty much everything.
Right.
And it all was reflected in his music.
Yeah.
So that was kind of what started the shift. Was I just realized that I could reflect in my music and it could help me process what I was going through, and I didn't just need to vent for the sake of venting.
I was listening to the As God Intended mixtape you put out at the top of the year.
Yeah.
And you kind of like separately mentioned, like, my favorite season of the year is When My Friends Don't Die.
Yeah.
Have you endured any of loss because of the violence here in the city, or?
Yeah. Since I'm getting emotional, I didn't even expect to. Since 2014, I've lost a friend or a family member every year. Not necessarily to violence. A couple of them have been lost to violence.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was writing that tape, the goal was, I'm gonna show people how good of a rapper I am kind of at the beginning, and that's gonna pull people in. And then if they stick around for long enough, they're gonna be able to hear what I've been going through.
Right.
And you know, I went through most of my life just based on where I grew up. I didn't really know anybody my age who was dying young. And then suddenly in 2014, it was like Brother Mike passed away. And he was somebody, Brother Mike Hawkins, who used to run U Media and Lyricist Loft. And
yeah.
He was somebody who I really valued and looked up to as an educator and just as a human being, hip hop head.
Yeah.
Late in 2014, earlier in 2014, a friend of mine from Milwaukee, she passed away suddenly. And like people just started, I lost a family friend and a close personal friend to suicide in 2015. And it just kind of felt like the hits didn't stop coming. And so it just as a part of that, there's a former student of mine named Corvus who passed away. He used to rap as Chrono, who passed away, or he didn't pass away. He was a victim of a stray bullet outside of a CTA station. And then John Walt, who I was friends with,
Pivot Gang,
yeah, from Pivot. So both of those things happening as well. But even by that point, I'd already kind of experienced so much loss just in a very short amount of time. So that I know that was very long-winded, but
no, absolutely. We're talking with Defcee here on 88.7 FM WLUW's The Morning Rush. I'm Weekend Gabe. We only got a few more minutes left. There's so much that we still haven't talked on, but I definitely want to talk about the work that you're doing with Add2.
Okay.
The writers' workshop that you guys are doing in partnership with young Chicago authors. Is it YCA or CYA?
YCA.
YCA. And
CYA is what you need to do when you're on the radio. You know.
So you guys welcome young teenagers or young artists who are interested in doing spoken word, doing hip hop, doing these writing workshops. Mm-hmm. How did you get roped into that world?
So when I graduated from the University of Wisconsin in 2012, I'd already been working with Seb Severe, who used to run a radio show up here.
So he was just
to work with the hip hop.
No, he was just here last week. Right into him.
So we'd already started doing kind of private rap workshops in Oak Park through a social worker there. And we were helping kids. Like our very first summer, we had 2 students we were working with, and we actually recorded an EP with them and put it out on iTunes. And we tried to keep that going. And Kevin Koval, shout out to Kevin Koval,
absolutely,
was at the Hip Hop Project in this studio, and Sev was talking about the work we did. I didn't even make the connection until now. I was talking about the work we did, and Kevin reached out to me because he knew I just graduated from college. And he told me he wanted me to be a part of Young Chicago Authors Teaching Artist Corps, which was in its first year. Mm-hmm. And as part of the Teaching Artist Corps, wanted me to run MC Rec Shop. So I started running MC Rec Shop. Add2 came on board a couple of years ago. And ever since, it's just been one of, like, just a highlight of my life. And I know you mentioned we have young people who come through and teenagers who come through. But what else is beautiful is we have people who come through who are like, I used to rap all the time when I was in high school, and now I'm like 31, 32.
Yeah.
I haven't rapped in 10 years, but I just decided to come back and do this.
Yeah.
And so people will come back and they'll like, they might only stop by 1 or 2 times just because they feel like maybe they've aged out or something like that. But that's been something that's really cool to see too. And it's some of the most rewarding work I do is in education or is adjacent to public education. And being able to not only help facilitate the growth of young artists, but to also help people who felt like it was over for them gravitate back toward the art.
Right.
Has been a really rewarding experience of mine in working with YCA.
Yeah, having that space available for people to take advantage of. I wasn't sure if it was like a day. Usually, kind of like with these workshops and these opportunities, they're more dedicated to students.
Oh yeah,
for
absolutely.
them to for them to have a space to explore. I didn't realize it was kind of like open to all people who are interested in.
I mean, that was surprising to me too, because I wasn't expecting to teach people who are even older than myself. But it's happened so often, and it's been really beautiful to see. So it really is like when we say all ages, not only is there not a minimum, there's also not a maximum.
Sure.
And so we've been running that now. MC Rec Shop is about to enter into its 7th year. And time really flew by, but and I want to shout out Ad2 real quick. I know we don't have much time, but Ad2 is one of the pillars of hip hop in this city.
Oh, absolutely.
One of the pillars of youth advocacy in this city, in addition to being one of the best rappers in this city.
Absolutely.
And he's somebody who could be pursuing music full time, but instead takes his time out to not only run youth programming full time on the South Side, but to also take 2 hours out of his weekend to co-facilitate Rec Shop with me. And I'm really fortunate for that. And I think since he's come on board, I always liked Rec Shop, but Rec Shop got even better since Ad2 came and joined the team. So we're looking to do a whole lot more stuff, hopefully within the next year. We'll definitely be doing more MC Olympics events. So we've been doing that through the Adidas Original Store, our Grand Prix, with our 4 finalists, our 4 champions from the other MC Olympic events that have happened during the season. Is going to be happening August 1st at the Adidas Original Store in Wicker Park. And yeah, I can't praise Ad2 highly enough, and I also can't say enough about how much MC Rec Shop has done for me, both as an educator and as a rapper myself.
Yeah. And where can people, if they want to find out the next workshop, where can they go?
So we're on break until October.
Wow.
But because we wrapped up a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
If you want to find out more, youngchicagoauthors.org. And then you can also follow them at Young Shy Authors on Twitter and at Young Chicago Authors on Instagram.
All right. Before we go, it wouldn't be fair for you not to plug your new EP.
Yeah.
It's out there. It's called Summer Courses EP. There's an interesting component, and I'm glad I asked before we got on air. So each song has like a summer and a year attached to it.
Right.
And that's the year that you were feeling at that time. So you're kind of recapturing the spirit, the vibe of that point.
Right.
Your memory's a lot better than mine because I can't remember anything I was doing in any of those summers. Thank God for Facebook memories. But what was the inspiration behind it? Obviously, you did the mixtape at the beginning of the year. Your output is starting to pick up a little bit. You got some projects that are going to probably come at the end of the year. So obviously, it's appropriate. We're in the summer months.
Yes,
but
sir.
what was the inspiration behind it?
So it originally was a song, just a song of me rapping. So I put out a song called 5 Courses a couple of years ago with a producer named Knows the Time from Milwaukee. Great producer, better human being, and knows the time. Friend of the show, and Knows the Time. Had this beat tape, or had a bunch of beats on SoundCloud. So I decided to just pick 5 of them and rap on them and make it one song called 5 Courses. So he sent me an early listen to a beat tape of his called Summer's End. And so I decided to do a summer courses that he could potentially add to physical editions of the music over 5 of those beats. And so my challenge to myself as a writer was, well, if I'm going to call it summer courses, maybe I can write a verse about 5 different summers. And so, I have the summer 18, summer 17, where I'm just feeling myself and enjoying the summer. You have summer 15, which is, more kind of deeper relationship stuff that I was going through at the time. Summer 10, where I was really kicking it super heavy, but it stands out as a really transformative summer. I was hanging out with Speedy Calhoun, who killed his guest verse on there, and also meeting people like Freshwaters and rappers who are at the Lyricist Loft open mic with Brother Mike.
Right.
And then summer 07, which is when I found out the story about my homie Cedric, unfortunately suffering at the hands of the Chicago Police Department, an instance of police brutality and racial profiling. So each of those summers, there's something significant about it that just made me want to write a verse about it. Yeah.
Is that where the 12?
Yeah, that's where 12 comes from.
Yeah.
And again, that was my first time. That incident had happened weeks after I'd been in the car with him and my guy Ricky, and we'd gotten pulled over by the police, and the police had allegedly pulled him over for a broken taillight that wasn't broken, and was being really rude to them. And then when they saw me in the back seat, being the only white guy in the car, attitude totally shifted. Super polite. Wrote him a letter saying, if anybody else pulls you over for this broken taillight that wasn't broken, just show them this, and you could give them my badge number. And then weeks later, pulled over beaten. Yeah. So I mean, that's probably, I would say, one of the 3 or 4 most important songs I've ever made. And it's been making an impact on this EP, and I'm really happy to see that.
I'm glad you're out there working, man. We appreciate you stopping in. Where can people get the project?
You can get it anywhere music is streaming, including defcee.bandcamp.com. So that's defcee.bandcamp.com.
You can put some love behind that support there.
Yeah, and you can throw $3 to it on the Bandcamp. That's where I see the largest percentage of the sales. Or you can buy it on streaming platforms if that's more convenient for you. Add it to your library. At this point, I'm not about trying to make music or make money from music. I'm trying to make it as accessible as possible. So anything y'all want to do to support, even if it's just adding it to your Apple Music library, I appreciate it. And I want to thank WeekendGabe for having me up here.
Thank you, man.
I've admired your work on radio for a long time. I actually haven't told you that before.
Oh, well, thank you.
And I've seen what you've done for other artists in this position. And it means that I'm doing something right if I'm up here with you right now.
Absolutely.
So
you are killing it. Thank you, sir. Well, we'll have to talk to your dad about the business side of things, because I don't like your attitude about just doing the music without being compensated for it. So we might need to have a discussion with you about that. But it's 8:57. That's our time. Defcee, man, thank you so much for making time for us and coming up this morning. We appreciate it. We know it's a long journey. That is our time. We'll be back at it next Sunday right here on The Morning Rush. No guest schedule, but we'll find someone to drop in. I'm loving these hour conversations that we've been doing. We had Neek. We had Chris Practice last week. We had you. It's just been a great in-depth conversation to have to talk about Chicago music and hip-hop, so it's always a good time. All right, Voices from the Circles is due up next. Have a great Sunday. Enjoy it, and also enjoy your Independence Day, and don't blow your arms off. Stay safe out there. All right, we'll be back at it. WeekendGabe, The Morning Rush, we're out.